Hello and welcome to another video of gtm.time with me, Julian, and today I want to talk with you about adjusted bounce rate. Before we get started, these little videos are as always brought to you by my Udemy course on Google Tag Manager, and you can check that out at gtm.time/YouTube, where you'll also get a little bit of a discount for this course. But now let's get started talking about bounce rate. So the bounce rate is often seen as this metric to evaluate landing pages. So does the traffic that hits my page actually stick around or leave the page? There's actually a little bit of a problem here with the bounce rate because the way that it's defined in Google Analytics. Let's have a look. So a bounce in Google Analytics is really counted as somebody comes to a page and then doesn't click through to the next page. So it's a session with only one page view, and that would be counted as a bounce, and the rate would be the people who don't click through to the next page versus the people who visit a second page. Now this is a little bit of a problem because that way the bounce rate doesn't really tell us anything about user intent, and we can't really draw from that people liked the page and clicked on or didn't like the page and left right away. For example, here people land on the Contact Us page because maybe they have searched for the business contact on Google, enter the page and find the information right there on the first screen, and they're satisfied with their visit and they leave. So a high bounce rate doesn't really tell us anything about the user intent here. He's satisfied with his visit and leaves the page. Now there's a better way to adjust that bounce rate. So adjusted bounce rate would take into consideration if somebody had an interaction on the page or stayed on the page for a certain amount of time. And this can be useful. So if we adjust the bounce rate, we could see a bounce as a page view without an event, without an interaction, without the intent to actually read the page or not. And this can be really valuable for us because it gives us a better measurement of how the landing page actually performs. So we can adjust the bounce rate. So to get that installed with Google Tag Manager, we'll actually fire an event after 10 seconds, which will signalize to Google Analytics that the user has been active on that page. So it's interaction that fires off to Google Analytics and will tell Google Analytics that this can't be counted as a bounce anymore. And we will use a trigger, the GTM timer trigger, that will automatically fire this event after 10 seconds. Now we do this with an event because an event actually doesn't inflate the page view count. So we could also do this with a virtual page view, but this would inflate our page view count and we don't want this to happen. So we'll just fire an event in this case. And the results will be that your bounce rate actually will plummet around the 20% mark, but it will give you just a better understanding to maybe read the page, click on a button and go further into your site. So let's set it up in Google Tag Manager. All right, so to get the event triggered after 10 seconds, we just need to start out putting it in by clicking on add a new tag and choosing Google Analytics because it will be a Google Analytics event, and we'll use Universal Analytics because that's what we have running on the site. And then it comes to the trigger. Now we want to fire this after 10 seconds, and there's an option if you go into more and define a new trigger, you'll have the event timer available. So let's click on that and we can filter down. Since we only have one timer that we really use on this page, we can go with all timers. Otherwise we would need to filter further down, and we can now give this trigger an appropriate name. So let's specify this here, and the event name will still be GTM timer. We could rename that, but we'll stay with GTM timer. And now we put here the interval when the event should be triggered. So this is 10 seconds, 10,000 for 10,000 milliseconds. And we will give it a limit. because if we don't give it a limit, GTM timer would start over and over again and fire over and over again after 10 seconds every time. And we just want to trigger it once, so this limit will be 1. And here you can then specify when this GTM timer listener should be deployed. Since we want to have it deployed on all the pages, we'll just go with the normal .star regex. Alright, so this trigger is ready to go. Let's save this trigger. And now this is part of our tag. And we'll continue to configure the tag. Now let's give it a good name. And we'll give it, as a tracking ID, we choose our tracking ID. I have it stored here in a variable. And as a track type, of course, we'll choose event. Now, I'll just do this pretty generic. You could choose something else if you want to change it into something that's more appropriate. But for me, it's all about just sending this event over to Google Analytics. And as the non-interaction hit, we should leave it at false, so it actually counts toward bounce rate and will be triggered to signalize an interaction to Google Analytics. So let's create this tag. And all we need to do now is to go to the preview and debug mode, return to our site, and reload this page. Now, once this console loads, we wait 10 seconds. And we see a new event here, GTM timer. And upon this event, the event for Google Analytics was fired. Now we can control this all in Google Analytics. So let's go over to Google Analytics. In the real-time reporting, we would be able to see an event that happened. Yes, and with our correct category, action and label. So that works all fine. And in the overview, we also have a new page view. So this worked fine, and this will reduce our bounce rate to a more concise metric. Now, obviously, to spin this to the end, you would need to go to the publish button, publish a new version, and deploy this to all the users so it has actually effect. And then you would see that in Google Analytics. As you know, this timer listener could be customized towards a time that suits your landing page better. So if you want to trigger this interaction after 30 seconds or 1 minute, you could configure it as in this timer, so it's really flexible in customization. So that's it for this week's video. If you have questions, just let me know in the comments. And I'm also open to do new videos, so put your suggestions in the comments below. I'm Julian. Till next time. So now let's get started with scroll tracking within GTM. And what we'll do in this little tutorial is implement a custom HTML tag, which will basically act as our event listener in Google Tag Manager. And when but now let's get started on the auto event tracking. Now, auto event tracking is basically a trigger. Now, the cool thing about Google Tag Manager, as I said before, is that you can nowadays trigger events and tags upon a click, a link click, a form submit, or even history listens, which are these events that happen when you have an Ajax site, or you can